We're seized with the impact these tariffs are having on our industries. We're taking the time necessary to secure what, in our judgment, might be a good deal for the Canadian economy. We're making progress. We're not there yet, but, Mr. Chair, that work continues.
Canadians were told that Prime Minister Mark Carney had the personal touch to deal with Donald Trump. He claimed he could pick up the phone, send a message, and make progress on tariffs. Yet the reality could not be more different. Dominic LeBlanc stood before senators repeating the same tired phrase, "We're not there yet." After months of promises, after endless reassurances, nothing has changed. The tariffs remain in place, Canadian industries are still bleeding, and the people who trusted Carney to deliver are left exposed. What was supposed to be strength now looks like weakness, and what was sold as confidence has collapsed into excuse after excuse.
He himself talking to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who is Trump's point man on tariffs. He says they are in conversation regularly, and we know, of course, and LeBlanc reminded senators of this, that Mark Carney is personally in touch with Donald Trump on a pretty casual.
LeBlanc admitted he is in constant talks with Trump's trade team. Carney's office even boasts of personal texts and phone calls with the president. But what have those conversations produced? Not a single concession. Tariffs on lumber, cabinets, and furniture continue to crush mills across Ontario and British Columbia. The steel sector has been hammered for most of the year. Thousands of jobs have vanished, with unemployment climbing as industries lose their biggest customer. Every time Canadians ask for results, Ottawa answers with the same line: talks are ongoing. The patience of families who depend on these industries is wearing thin. They hear that progress is coming, but their paychecks are gone. They see that negotiations drag on, but the tariffs never move. Faced with failure in Washington, LeBlanc tries to sell a new vision. He says Canada can diversify, build a virtuous circle by finding new partners and reducing reliance on the United States. But this is not a plan. It is a slogan. 70% of Canada's exports still flow south of the border. No trade mission to Europe or Asia can replace that market in the short term. The forestry and auto industries cannot simply shift contracts to Berlin or Jakarta. Carney's government keeps talking about resilience, yet the policies only add costs and uncertainty. Companies hesitate to invest, provinces are forced into subsidy battles, and workers are left wondering if their livelihoods will survive. Canadian farmers, already hit by higher fertilizer and shipping costs, see their crops piling up with nowhere to go. Small manufacturers struggle to meet complex rules of origin demands while losing access to their primary customer. The much-touted diversification strategy leaves ordinary families paying more for groceries, fuel, and housing while being told to wait years for benefits that never arrive. The diversification dream sounds noble, but on the ground it has backfired badly. Instead of strength, it reveals just how trapped Canada remains. What looms over all of this is the review of the Canada-US-Mexico agreement in 2026. Trump has shown no sign of backing down. He holds the tariff weapon tightly, waiting for the moment to extract even greater concessions. Carney promised he would shield Canada from this pressure, but every month proves the opposite. Tariffs stay, jobs vanish, and prices climb higher. Families pay more at the grocery store, construction firms pay more for lumber, manufacturers pay more for steel. Even the Bank of Canada has warned that prolonged tariff shocks could shave off another 2% of GDP, a blow that would ripple through every province. Without a credible deal, investment will flee, capital will dry up, and the cost of living will soar even higher. As Canadians head toward 2026, the country faces negotiations from a position of weakness, not strength. Carney's failure to deliver now only ensures that the future battles will be harder. The warning is clear. What seems bad today may look mild compared to what is still to come.
If you were to, write a story about the economic impact of the tariffs thus far, what would the headline read?
Well, it's like we talked about last time. We expected investment, there would be a freeze. So what we've got now is two economies actually that are sliding, let's say not in recession probably, but sliding in that direction. The trajectory is not a positive one for both the US and Canada.
The warning signs are flashing red. Mark Carney came into office promising stability, but the backbone of Canada's economy is weakening by the day. Unemployment is climbing, with youth joblessness now running at double the national average. Layoffs have spread from factories to offices, and businesses have stopped hiring for months. Families once told to trust Ottawa's plan are instead staring at help-wanted boards that never get filled. Trump's tariff wall was always going to be a test, yet Carney has failed to shield the country. Instead of a clear strategy, Canadians are left with uncertainty, higher costs, and a government scrambling to explain why the nation is sliding into trouble. Carney insists his answer is massive new spending. Defense contracts, infrastructure schemes, and so-called catalytic investments are all advertised as the silver bullet. He claims that public money will attract private capital, building projects that will drive growth. But the reality is stark. Investment has frozen, companies have cut back, and confidence is evaporating. Ottawa's promises of partnership with business are ringing hollow as firms hold their cash instead of expanding. What Carney calls a shield looks more like a sieve, pouring billions into programs that swell the deficit but fail to deliver jobs. And here lies the deeper contradiction. By separating flashy investment pledges from everyday government spending, Carney pretends that deficits do not matter. Yet Canadians know better. Every dollar borrowed must be repaid, and every promise made without results erodes trust. Instead of spurring private growth, his so-called catalytic model has paralyzed decision-making. Projects stall while interest costs climb, leaving Canada weaker both fiscally and economically. The backfire is undeniable. Spending without results is not a shield, but a liability. For ordinary Canadians, the pain is no longer abstract. Prices are climbing as inflation trickles through the economy. At first, companies swallowed the hit, but now costs are landing squarely on consumers. Families are told to take pride in Buy Canadian campaigns and to stay home for their holidays. But this is not resilience, it is retreat. Retail sales may look stable, yet that stability comes from households giving up foreign trips and cutting back elsewhere. The truth is harsher. Consumer strength is masking a deeper collapse. And while Ottawa points to those numbers as proof of stability, the story on the ground is very different. Parents are cutting meals, students are delaying studies, and young workers are trapped in a shrinking job market. Youth unemployment near 15% is not a statistic, it is a warning siren. A generation that endured the pandemic is now losing faith in the future. Carney's policies have turned the cost of tariffs into a tax on families. Instead of relief, Canadians face the cruel reality that they are paying for both Trump's tariffs and Ottawa's mismanagement. Trump's tariffs were a heavy blow, but they also revealed the measure of Canada's leadership. While Washington imposed its will, Ottawa had a chance to respond with clarity and strength. Instead, Carney offered spending sprees, vague talk of catalytic investment, and rising red ink. The backbone of the economy is weakening because his strategy has failed. What was sold as a shield has backfired into higher debt, fragile growth, and lost confidence. Canadians can already feel it in their wallets and in their job prospects. And unless this government changes course, the damage will only deepen. The warning could not be clearer. Carney's backfire is exposed, and the worst may still lie ahead.
As the trade war drags on, Canadian workers are feeling the fallout. From manufacturing to transportation, industries hit hardest by tariffs are also getting hit hard by job losses.
I think employers, businesses in general, they're very concerned about the uncertainty that we're facing.
Companies are so much slower to hire.
Canada is staring at its worst jobs crisis since the pandemic, and the numbers speak for themselves. In August alone, the economy lost 66,000 jobs. The unemployment rate spiked to 7.1%, the highest level since 2016 outside of COVID. Ottawa tried to spin it as a bump in the road, but for Canadian families, this is not just a statistic. It is the mortgage they can't pay, the food they can't afford, and the future they now fear. Mark Carney promised stability in the face of tariffs. What he delivered instead is a collapse in confidence, a surge in layoffs, and a labor market bleeding red. This is not leadership. It is damage control dressed up as optimism. The real driver behind this pain is Trump's tariff wall. Carney had months to prepare, yet his response left Canadian industries exposed. Windsor, once the beating heart of auto manufacturing, now suffers an unemployment rate above 11%. Oshawa stands at 9%. General Motors cut shifts and suppliers followed, with hundreds shown the door. We heard it directly from local voices. They have a fight on their hands. That anger is real because the consequences are immediate. And it is not just autos. In Amherstburg, the Crown Royal bottling plant, nearly a century old, will shut its doors, leaving 160 people jobless. Generations worked there, and now that heritage is gone. The company calls it streamlining and shifting bottling closer to U.S. consumers. Translation, Canada loses again. Carney had no leverage to stop it, no plan to keep those jobs on Canadian soil. When the supply chain moves south, the tax base shrinks, small businesses suffer, and the town center goes quiet. The crisis goes beyond cars and whiskey. Technical services, education, even sectors far removed from steel and tariffs are cutting staff. Employers are freezing hiring, choosing only the rarest candidates, while skilled trades workers flood recruiters with desperate calls. Recruiters say it plainly: companies are slower, pickier, colder. Communities are hollowing out. Amherstburg's mayor warns the town could become a bedroom community, a place where residents sleep but no longer work. That is how decline looks on the ground. Empty shifts, empty storefronts, empty optimism. Carney touts diversification, special incentives, and patient strategy. But waiting does not pay the bills. Press releases do not reopen plants. If the policy can't anchor production through a tariff storm, it isn't strategy, it's surrender. And every week of drift deepens the scarring. Apprentices leave the trades, families move out, and the next investment skips Canada altogether. Now the Bank of Canada is weighing an interest rate cut, hoping to soften the blow. That is not a plan. It is a band-aid on an industrial wound. Meanwhile, Trump dictates the rules, raising tariffs, moving factories, forcing corporations to shift operations south. Carney reacts, always one step behind, never setting the tempo. Canada's workers pay the price. Families in Windsor, Oshawa, and Amherstburg know exactly what Carney's leadership means: layoffs, lost income, fading communities. Even the U.S. is wobbling, just 22,000 jobs added last month, yet Ottawa still cannot find leverage or certainty. The truth is inescapable. Tariffs may start in Washington, but the collapse is happening in Canada. If Ottawa keeps confusing strategic patience with passivity, the backfire will grow. Interest rate cuts cannot rebuild factories, only hard results can. Until Carney stops praising stability and starts delivering it, this will not be the bottom. It will be the warning siren before the next wave of job losses.
Now, all of this comes as Canada looks to diversify its trade portfolio in the face of Trump's tariff. And earlier this week, Prime Minister Mark Carney announced a new economic and security agreement with Mexico. And just yesterday, Canada's finance minister held talks in Denmark with European Union officials.
Canada once counted the United States as its anchor in trade. That anchor has now been cast aside. Faced with Washington's tariff storm, Prime Minister Mark Carney is signaling that America is no longer the ally to lean on. Within days of signing a deal with Mexico, Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne rushed to Europe for strategic talks. Ottawa wants the world to see strength. In reality, it looks like desperation. Turning to Brussels in this moment is not a show of confidence. It is Canada clutching at a straw, betting on a partner whose own house is in chaos. The move is sold as diversification, but it risks exposing Canada to even greater instability. Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs were designed to force Canada back to the table. The White House raised duties on cars, metals, and farm exports, confident that Ottawa could not survive with access to the U.S. market. That bet was not wrong. Nearly 80% of Canadian trade still flows south. Instead of facing that reality, Carney is trying to project defiance abroad. He prefers photo ops in Mexico City and talking points in Denmark rather than confronting Washington directly. By avoiding a real showdown with the United States, his government signals weakness. Even allies recognize that Ottawa is reacting rather than leading, chasing headlines instead of securing binding commitments. It may look like Canada is building new bridges, but the truth is harsher. By avoiding its largest market, Canada is putting jobs, factories, and farms at risk. This is not leverage, it is retreat. Carney and Champagne are pointing to Europe as a lifeline, yet the continent they are chasing is anything but stable. Look closer and the cracks are everywhere. For example, in France, hundreds of thousands filled the streets to protest budget cuts and foreign aid. In the United Kingdom, the government is drowning in unemployment, rising prices, and record-breaking waves of illegal migration. And in Germany, the economic engine of Europe is sputtering. Industry is shrinking, energy costs have exploded, and iconic automakers are closing plants. The loss of access to cheap Russian oil and gas, which once kept factories competitive and energy costs under control, has only made the situation worse. More than half of German companies plan layoffs, while a third are considering moving production abroad. This is the fragile bloc Ottawa is now courting. Betting on a fractured EU to replace American demand is a dangerous illusion. Europe cannot even stabilize itself. To believe it can rescue Canada is wishful thinking at best. The pattern is clear. Trump raises tariffs, and instead of negotiating with Washington, Carney runs to far-flung capitals. Mexico and Europe are paraded as alternatives, yet neither changes the math. America is Canada's lifeline, and China is Canada's second-largest market. Both are tightening the screws. Europe, meanwhile, is paralyzed by protests, political turmoil, and industrial decline. This leaves ordinary Canadians trapped in the middle. Families are already struggling with higher grocery bills, while small businesses face rising costs for materials and shipping. Farmers see their markets shrinking, and manufacturers watch investment drift away. The promise of diversification sounds good in speeches, but on the ground it means uncertainty, layoffs, and less security for workers who depend on steady trade. The gamble is obvious. Carney is risking Canada's economy on partners who cannot deliver. Canadians know what this means. It means higher prices at home, lost markets abroad, and industries caught in the squeeze between Washington and Beijing. Far from strengthening Canada's hand, this strategy leaves the country more vulnerable than ever. What is being sold as diversification is in fact a retreat into weakness. And if nothing changes, the consequences for Canadian workers and families will only grow worse in the months ahead.